Hello, and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynne Testoni. I'm a journalist and content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we bring you all kinds of tips, tricks, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
I used spreadsheets for 15 years.
Oh my God, did you?
I know. But as my business grew, I grew out of the spreadsheets.
Yes.
And it got harder to sort of keep on top of all my invoicing and quoting and things like that. And Rounded was the accounting software that finally converted me. And it helped simplify my taxes and also just let me take ownership of what goes on in my freelance business. And I love that I've got visibility over my finances, so I can see what's happening with my cash flow and all the other insights that are on the dashboard.
I know, the dashboard is so cool. I love a good pie chart, and I love the whole thing because it makes it so much easier to work it out.
Yeah.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you can save 20% on any annual Rounded plan, even if you're an existing customer. So see the show notes for details.
Hi, Lynn. I've got a question for you. Do you ever just think I could have handled that better with dealing with a client or picking up a new client, all of those situations we get into as freelancers?
Of course, I think we can always do something better. So yes, I think my thing is that I'm particularly bad with long-standing clients. So because I think I do tend to get a bit comfortable sometimes with that relationship, forget to be a bit strategic.
Yeah. So you're not sending them a Christmas present?
Oh, no, I've never done that. I know you do.
I do that every year. I'm big on Christmas presents for clients. But anyway.
Yeah, I have a bad tendency to take people for granted. And I think I learnt my lesson, though, with COVID. So it showed how it could all go horribly wrong. But what about you?
Yes, I think even when you've been freelancing for a long time, you can still have all those facepalm moments, especially when you're trying to land dream clients, which is what we're talking about today. And I'm so excited to have a guest on today whose emails I love. And she's also on the Business Badassery podcast with Kirsty Fanton.
We love
Kirsty. Who appeared on the Summit stage. We love Kirsty. She was on the Summit stage this year to rave reviews. So the planets have aligned, and we have got Amy Posner on, who I know will be familiar with a lot of copywriters who listen to us.
Yeah, totally. You've mentioned Amy's emails to me before, and I also listened to, she did a great episode with Ed Gandia on his podcast not long ago. And so she's well known for giving away lots of value, knows her stuff when it comes to landing clients and managing them. So do you want to read a quick bio of Amy and we'll get her into the hot seat?
Yes. Amy Posner, aka the Client Whisperer, is an established entrepreneur and phenomenal business coach who empowers and equips digital creative freelancers to develop the entrepreneurial intelligence they need to build the businesses they want. Over her 30-year career, she's built 6 highly profitable businesses, had multiple 200K years as a freelancer, and mentored thousands of clients to create their own version of success, whether that's a sustainable solo business or an online agency. Amy's also created numerous online resources to support digital creatives as they make the move from freelancer to 6-figure business owner, including the recently launched Complete Breakthrough Freelancer course and the long-standing Business Badassery. I've said that wrong. With an American accent podcast, which we mentioned above and which is fabulous. Amy's also been featured on Copy Hackers and as a guest on several top podcasts, including the Copywriter Club, Copy Chief Radio, and the Deliberate Freelancer. And that's Mel, isn't it? We love her.
We love Mel.
Welcome, Amy. It is so great to have you here.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm laughing because Kirsty said, why did we give the podcast that name? Australians can't say it.
It's really true.
Good tip.
Badassery. Badassery. Yeah, it doesn't sound so right when we say it with an Australian accent. Anyway, it's very good.
So it's so great to have you on the podcast, Amy. You may be known to many of our copywriting listeners, but do you want to tell us a little bit about your career journey and what you've been doing and a bit about that entrepreneurial spirit you have?
Sure, happy to. So I grew up in a family business. So, the business conversation happened for me very early. That was our, around the dinner kind of talk. But interestingly, I never wanted to be in business. I wanted to be, the creative one. And so, pursued a bunch of different things, lived in New York City, got a random job like you might get in your 20s. And it was interesting because I had a lot of ideas in that business. And, my business, well, he wasn't my business partner yet, but my boss and I would sit around after work sometimes and talk about things, and I'd share ideas and he would implement some of them. And just out of the blue, after, I don't know, about 6, 8 months of working together, he offered me a business partnership and wanted to
Wow.
know if I wanted to buy into the business. And I mean, it came totally out of left field for me, but I thought, why not? I mean, I love this. I love the idea part of it. And I realized that business was very creative because you kind of could take nothing and build into an idea and make something happen. And so that was the beginning of, the entrepreneurial journey for me. I've owned 6 businesses since then. That business I started, or didn't start with him, but partnered with him in, is still exists today, which is pretty crazy because that's a really long time for a business to be in place. But I was part of a marketing agency. I've been a coach. I've been a freelancer. I have my current business now. So it's just something that I've just really, really enjoyed. I love the freedom. And again, I love making something from nothing. And to me, that's sort of the entrepreneurial itch, I guess you could call
Yes.
it. And that's been the thread through all of the things that I've done for, 30 plus years now.
Wow.
I love that about making something from nothing. That I can really relate to that as a freelancer, and also having all the ideas and not knowing which ones to action. It's almost like exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
Mm, mm. Well, I read a lot of newsletters aimed at freelancers, and yours is one of them. And I often just think to myself when I'm really busy, oh, I'll read that one later. I'm going to put that in the later bucket, or this one is going straight to the bin. But yours is the one I always just drop everything and read. It's called The Breakthrough Beat, and I love it. I feel like it's like a little mini masterclass in how to do things better in your business. But as I've read through your newsletters, I've always wondered, what were the things that you really struggled with before you got to the point of being able to help others, I suppose?
Well, the thing I think particularly in my freelance journey was, how do you find clients? Who buys what you sell? I mean,
Yeah.
and literally, like, I did not know who bought what I sold. I had always written copy and done marketing for my own businesses. And then I had a couple of gigs, you know how it is. People say, "Oh, you can do that, and would you help me?" And I thought, I love this. I'm going to make a business of this. And then I was like, kind of lost. Like, who buys what you sell? And also, why, you start looking around and it's like, well, why is, one person paying maybe $3,000 to write a website and somebody else is paying 20,000? Like, who are they and what's the difference? And is it the freelancer / copywriter? Is it the client? And that was a big puzzle for me to sort, really big challenge.
Yeah. How did you do that?
I tried to get pricing from various people, which was not all that. I mean, because I didn't want to fake and pretend I was a client or anything like that. So I was trying to find things that were published and see what other people were doing, and kind of tried to gauge what's my level of expertise based on, maybe what somebody else was doing. And I just set prices and got out into the marketplace and tested it. And what I quickly learned was there are different types of clients with different types of expectations. They have different knowledge about their needs and what's available in the market. And so I kept sort of, moving myself around to find what was the right positioning for me and who could I serve best and whose problems could I solve, at what increasing prices, if I'm honest, how could I make more and deliver value that people perceived was valuable and were willing to pay for. And I found it challenging to figure out. Once I figured it out, it was kind of a question of figuring out how I could then move into this sort of more elite class of client, for lack of a better thing to call it.
Yeah.
But that really mystified me. I mean, because I'd never been in business before where I didn't know who bought what I sold. And when I set myself up and realized that was the case, I thought, oh, have I lost my mind? Maybe this wasn't such a good plan after all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting that I think pricing, we get asked that more than anything.
We do.
And it's a common question. And it is that finding where you're sitting in the market and what people want for what you're going to deliver and what you can charge for that. We're talking a little bit about client mistakes. So do you see some client mistakes that freelancers make, like the sort of things that you commonly see up?
I do. One of the big ones I see is freelancers not stepping into their expertise.
Mhm.
And so they see, and they see the client, and these sort of go hand in hand. They see the client as a little bit of an adversary, right? And almost maybe you could say like a boss employee kind of a role where they think like the decisions are up to the client and the relationships up to the client and how things are going to move are up to the client. And really, the better paying clients are they're looking for processes, they're looking for systems, and they're looking for that expert, if you will, to drive the process and to demonstrate the expertise. And I think, especially early on, you can understand it. People are not maybe comfortable in that role. But it's very easy to very quickly get pigeonholed, right? You start working like that, and then that's how you work. And it's very hard to get out of that loop and how clients perceive you. And so one of the biggest challenges I see is people, come to me very often and they don't know, like, they often refer to them as better clients. How do I get better clients, or how do I charge more money, for the work that I do? And is that even valid, right? Should I be charging, and what should I be charging? So I think it's the not perceiving themselves as an expert and understanding that that's what these, ideal clients, are really after, and then not creating the processes to demonstrate that, hey, it ain't my first rodeo and I know what to do here, and I can drive drive the bus, so to speak. Because one of the things that's really true is, like, even from the very first encounters, like the discovery call, like showing that you can lead signals that you can lead a project and that you know what you're doing. And so it starts very early on in the process and in the relationship, I think.
I love that, because I really think that speaks to mindset in a lot of cases. And once you get on a few discovery calls and then get off them and realize you actually do have a lot of knowledge and a huge amount of expertise that that client doesn't have, you start to realize, oh, I can be the one who's driving this. But you almost need to go through that process and hit that moment of realization, perhaps.
Oh, 100%. I just wrote an article that, that was titled, like, "Don't ask how I can help," right? Like, you don't want to show
Oh,
up and
yeah.
say, "How can I help?" Because then it's like you're opening the door for them to tell you how it's going to work. Like, what you really want to ask is, like, what's up? Like, what's your challenge? Why are we talking? What problem is it that you need to solve? Because usually when someone comes to you, there's some end result that they want.
Yeah.
But if you start talking about it in terms of a project, it can be very limiting. And where if you talk about, like, what's up, why now, what do you need? It ends up being a much more interesting and deeper conversation. And then you can bring your problem solving skills and, your potential solutions to the table, which demonstrates your expertise, but it also, gives the client confidence, because they see that again, know how to run this, which is ultimately what they're looking for, even if they don't know yet that that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. You mentioned as well just earlier about systems, and I really feel that a lot of freelancers go into business cobbling together a way of working until it doesn't work and we find a better way, or we hire a coach, or we do training and realize, oh, that person has a way better system and I could adopt that. I mean, is that a common trajectory in freelancing, and how can we do better even if we've been in business for many years?
Oh, 100%. And I think it's natural. I mean, a lot of people come to freelancing, from a job. And there's a certain mentality, and you need some time and you need some time, I guess, to understand that it's not that same relationship. And in fact, that's become the theme of my work over the last 3 years, is empowering freelancers with business skills. Because and I say this constantly, but you can have, like, the absolute best craftsperson, and if they're lacking business skills, they are just not going to eat as well as the mediocre craftsperson who has the business stuff dialed in. And I know it's not the sexiest thing. It's not the thing that people get into business for, right? They get into business usually because they're passionate about something, they love it, and they want to make a living at it. But unless you're really deliberate about how you make a living at it, you risk actually, end up hating the thing that you loved so much. And so I think it really comes down to that. And it's not, it doesn't have to be complex. We're not talking about, understanding, big business systems and any of that. It's understanding how you can run a tight ship, and just how all these things interrelate, like some of the things we've been talking about, like pricing, like presentation, how you're delivering value and how you're coming across to the client in a way that's meaningful and valuable to them.
I think it's really interesting because we often see is that there's sort of like stages of freelancing, and a lot of people come into it accidentally, and then it's all hustle, 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 and then they might start to make a decent amount of money, but they're exhausted. I guess there's a point when you have to take into that sort of planning approach and setting up systems. So otherwise you get caught up in this terrible treadmill. Is that what you see as well?
I do. And I think part of that and the working to exhaustion is not understanding the relationship between running a business and making money. And that, like what you make isn't what you keep. And you have all these business expenses. And so you have to figure out an equation. And I think, the thing that, and this is like a dead simple thing, but I think what happens a lot is we don't actually know how long something takes us. It's very easy to think like, oh yeah, and you give a client kind of a scope and a timeline, and you can probably get it done in that timeline. It may take, but often you find you're working a lot more hours than you thought you might have. And there's a really direct relation between how long something takes you and what you charge. And it's an onerous exercise, but if you actually time some projects and see how much time you're spending, and then how much you're actually making. And it's often a frightening equation. And one of the first things that needs to be adjusted is understanding really what your work involves and what kind of money you're making and how to price then accordingly. I think it's really challenging for people. And so I think that's sort of it's kind of the black hole of burnout.
Absolutely. Well, we're talking today about landing clients, ideally dream clients. When we were getting you on, we talked about, how we can be our own worst enemies when trying to get those kinds of clients that would really transform things in our business. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are we doing that is perhaps turning them away?
So turning them away from choosing us, do you mean? Or
giving us the green light on a project or that sort of thing.
So what I see a lot is, first, because there's a process, right? We know, right? There's, someone makes an inquiry, and then, if we're lucky, it leads to a discovery call, and the discovery call leads to a proposal. I think having a deep inquiry process, like right from the get-go, when somebody reaches out to you, to get a sense of who they are and what their needs are, and even in an email exchange back and forth, like how responsive are they? Do they show up? Do they ghost? What's their pattern and style? So it's first like, and learning a little bit about them, and maybe touching on budget. It might be premature, but depending on where someone came to you from, if it's a total unknown, because you can get very invested in spending a lot of time with someone without knowing if you've got fit.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first part. And then running a really tight discovery call, we've touched on that a bit, where you're demonstrating your expertise and someone gets an idea, like, is this person able to solve my problem, with what they're saying? And then I think that the next piece, and I see a lot of things sort of fall down in between a discovery call and a proposal, is that the proposal really kind of needs to be a sales pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think what happens for all of us when we're ready to get out our credit card is we worry and wonder, it's like, ooh, like, is this really a good decision? And will they really deliver what they said they will? And, is this the best fit for me? And I think that document is a critical piece of making them feel confident, making them feel comfortable, and getting buy-in. And very often, it's kind of a line item thing. The ones I see, it's like, I'm going to do this and it's going to cost that, and maybe these are the options. But, when you consider, you're on this call and you've talked about all these things, and if you do your call well, your discovery call well, people will tell you things, amazing things, deep things you'll never hear again if you work with them for 10 years.
Yes.
So if you can take that and talk about that in the proposal, because, chances are they're going to look at it, they're going to have forgotten what they told you. They may be sharing it with someone else who hasn't heard any of this. And so you have to kind of paint a picture of how you're going to solve the problem and what that's going to look like and what kind of outcomes that can potentially deliver for them. I mean, you need to almost get them excited about their project all over again. because once they've downloaded everything to you, now that document is very nuts and boltsy and, what's it going to cost me? And you need to remind them why they want to crack out the credit card and spend that money. Plus, I think that it instills confidence in them that you're very clear about, what's on offer here, what they hope to achieve, what results and outcomes they might have, so that they're going, oh, yes, you see me, you get me, I want this. And that was a very long answer with a lot of components, but
But it's so true, because I think clients are really wanting to be heard and listened to. And if you demonstrate that in that first instant with the proposal, that's a key part of why they choose you.
Mm. Something came up in Brain Camp about proposals, which I wanted to ask you as well. And we were sharing how we do them. And I typically just will do a quote in my accounting package and, itemize it or whatever. And some of the other people in there were saying, well, they do this whole Canva proposal that's really beautiful and it's got 3 tiers of payment options. And I'm like, wow, I do not do that. So what's your view about that? Do we pretty up our proposals and offer all the different payments?
so to me, they're two very different things. I never did pretty them
Yeah.
up. Mine were always Google Docs.
Yeah.
I've gotten ones that are pretty. People send me pretty ones. I sort of don't care.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody does.
Yeah.
What has impressed me in the pretty department is when people have presented live and had a slide deck. And I'm not necessarily impressed with the prettiness of it, but more the thoroughness of it and the time they've taken to, think about my business and to walk me through that.
Yeah.
That's impressed me. I think with the tiers of payment, I really like that.
Yeah.
But let me make sure we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about different kind of offers inside of something rather than the payment, like I pay you in thirds or halves or something, correct?
Yeah, it would be more like, here's a budget option, here's the middle option that I really want you to go for, and here's a really pie in the sky option, so you're sort of steering them towards the one you want them to choose.
I think that's sort of the general sales tactic is, you have the thing you want them to choose, and then there's less and more. But I also think, if you listen really carefully in the discovery call, very often people are telling you what else they want or what might come next or what this is leading to. And I have found very realistically that if I work on, like we do the project, but there's also the next thing, and I do it right then while my head is still deep in the project and all of their details, it's easier for me and it takes me less time. And I can actually deliver more value at a lower price.
Yeah.
Right. So I very often people have taken me up on the pie in the sky option because it is actually what they really want. And when I explain, listen, I mean, it makes perfect sense to them. Not only can we do it on a timeline, but I'm already deep in your business. And I'll tell people, you've got my brain. I mean, you're renting space in my brain. I'm thinking about you when I'm walking my dog. I'm thinking about you when I'm cooking dinner. And it's true. I mean, right. When you're in a project, you're deep in a project.
Yeah.
And so I find that that's really helpful for clients. Plus it's like sometimes they're like, oh, you heard what we actually want and our ultimate outcome, not just what we're talking to you about now. And again, like you said, they feel seen and heard. And I think very often as the contractor, we get hung up about the money. We think, oh, it's got to be inside of this thing. And, they may have more money or more budget. They just need to be shown, the options and what's possible.
Yeah.
I do. That's an interesting point when you're looking at different, price points or different package points, because I'm often surprised how many people take that top tier. And that's usually it's got everything that they've wanted. And I'm surprised sometimes I think sometimes as freelancers, we make assumptions about budget that we think especially when we're talking about getting the better clients, that when we move up, we're surprised when somebody wants that extra thing, because that's how you attract those better clients, isn't it? They're the ones that want the added value, the bells and whistles, a much more strategic approach. So that's often the way you move up, isn't it? Into those better clients.
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the other things is we kind of get intimidated by the numbers, right? It's like, well, I'm comfortable putting out a $5,000 proposal, but a $25,000 proposal. But what we forget is like, there's $25,000 worth of work there.
Yeah.
You're going to sweat for that money. I mean, you're going to work hard for that money. And sometimes it might be more attractive to do 5K projects than it is to do a 25K project. I mean, that's a decision for the contractor, the freelancer. But yeah, I think we make assumptions about budgets, and particularly big budgets and big numbers, because they seem so big,
Yeah.
right? But
When you're doing that proposal with all those zeros, it's especially the first few times, it's very intimidating.
Mm.
oh, it was for me. I remember it clearly. I can remember the exact project. Yeah, it was
Yes.
scary.
I
Mm.
do. I'd like to talk also about the lead generation process before you get into those discovery calls, because that also makes a difference, doesn't it? Like the ones you've had cold outreach, or the ones that come into you where they already are after you because they've heard that you're good, like a word of mouth or via LinkedIn or whatever. Do you think that makes a difference to the call?
100%. I do. I mean, it doesn't mean that a cold pitch can't be an equally good potential client or client, but I think when people come to you, they want what you have, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's clear. They've heard about you, they already know your reputation, and they're probably more willing to spend because you're less of a risk,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's an easier decision.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. Do you think that sort of the lead generation has changed? Because I know that when we sort of started doing this podcast, which is almost 6 years ago, it's about like there were a lot of LOLs, looking out to LOLs,
LOIs?
LOIs. Oh, so too many teenagers, but yeah, sort of letters of introduction and that. But now that I find, or maybe that's just because I've been doing this for so long, I get so many more warm leads. Do you think it's changed, or that people are less responsive to those cold outreach emails?
I think COVID changed the landscape. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot more people out there, and I think
Yeah.
people are getting more inquiries, and they're probably getting more inquiries that are sort of less finessed and less skilled. And so you know how it is, you just sort of shut down a little bit, like there's just too many things coming at you. But I mean, I see, and people who take the time with their pitch and are very deliberate and a little bit clever are still getting responses. I think people get impatient too with the long-term play.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think the long-term play is like the play. And it's great to have other things in your pocket. It's great to be able to pitch. It's great to be able to get clients in when you need them. But I think building the relationship, and even if you're, building a relationship where it's not direct face to face, it might be through your content, to know that you will need clients tomorrow and you're going to need them in 6 months and you're going to need them in a year. And so I think people forget that also, if you're talking to someone who does buy what you sell, they either have a need for it right now or they don't. And they might have someone they're working with right now or they don't. And there's kind of no reason to choose you, even if they're unhappy with who they know. But if they get to know you over time, there's a big reason to choose you over who they know. And I think people see it as sort of like very black and white, like it's a yes, it's a no.
Yep.
And I think of it more
Yes.
like courting people over time and sort of letting them get to know you and building the relationship for the long term. So, and I think people get kind of what we were talking about before. I think people get a little intimidated and they think that, they think the client leads the journey.
Yeah.
I think you can draw people to you. And I think if you're patient and you do it well and you don't get frustrated because you don't get something immediate, you get amazing things on the back end. But I think, it's hard to know. It's hard when you're doing it. If you're not getting, what you want immediately, it can be hard to stay the course. But I just know from seeing it over and over and over, the people who do that and are very clear about their voice and who they serve, and they're sure that they're hanging out and sharing that message in the place where those people that are those dream clients are also hanging out, it happens. It's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting what you say. You just kind of spark something in my mind about, that relationship building, but there's a lot of hidden relationship building in the content that you put out, because you don't think about really who's reading it and who's absorbing that and remembering you and, putting you in their back pocket maybe for 6 months time and all of that. So we don't really think about that so much. We think about relationship building as the direct, LOI conversation that comes from that and that sort of thing. But there's more going on.
I launched a small group coaching program this morning, and we were going around and people were talking about why they were there. And a woman said, I met Amy in 2020 and we had a conversation, and I decided right then I was going to work with her one day. This is the day.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
4 years. Someone else
Yeah.
said, I've been reading you forever. And I'm like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been doing this that you said and that you said, and it's very flattering on the one hand, but it's also very reassuring from a marketing point of view, and kind of speaks to the fact that you don't know how hard something is working, but if you persist and keep at it, you do get results.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. I just did a lovely sort of piece of content for somebody I worked with 10 years ago who hasn't had opportunity, has now moved into a content manager role, and immediately thought of me because he wanted somebody to write on a particular topic. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know he'd been following me on LinkedIn for 8 years. I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Really. I
It
mean,
is. I
yeah.
did remember his name.
Shows you what's going on in the background. But also I think maybe that is happening more now. Like, Amy, I'd love to ask you what you think is working right now in lead generation, because I feel like it's been a very wonky year for freelancers, and I'm definitely seeing that in the Rachel's List community.
Yeah, and well, I think AI really messed a lot of people up. I think there was a lot of fear, and people pulled back, and clients weren't sure. And is this going? I think that caused a lot of uncertainty. And I honestly think that all of the tried and true things still work.
Yeah.
I think cold pitching works. I think the long-term play works. I think content works great. One thing that I don't know how much people do right now, but the other thing that's brilliant is in person.
Yeah.
And not going to the conferences necessarily with your colleagues, but going to the conferences of the potential clients where there's need. I have a client who he's based his whole business on that. He likes travel and he likes going to conferences, granted, but he goes where there's nobody else that's offering what he's offering there, and he gets into conversations with people, and he looks like a rock star.
Yeah.
Because he knows how to solve their problems. He knows what their pain points are. I mean, he's very deliberate about it. But I think anyway, long story short, I think that's also a really untapped resource, because it seems odd. Like, why would you show up at a manufacturing conference or whatever? That just popped into mind. But that's why.
You absolutely would if you were going to be the only copywriter in the room. Do you know what I mean? That's such a smart strategy, like you say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting too, because I think that was a COVID thing, really. We did get out of the habit of meeting people in person, and events went all online, but they've come back. And I do find that the difference when you meet people face to face, it's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it's like an accelerator. I mean, you could spend, a year digitally what you can do, over a drink at a conference in an evening, because, you get eye to eye and people get a sense of who you are, and you build that, that proverbial know, like, and trust in a very short time, and you feel very differently and more connected to someone. It's just, I mean, in our digital age, it's kind of miraculous. Like, oh, in person, like, wow.
There's still a bit of excitement about meeting people in person, I think, too.
Yeah. We saw that at the summit a lot. Like, people get very excited about, in-person events. And they are fun. Yeah.
They are fun. Yeah. Do you take on clients yourself still, or are you mostly coaching? What does your typical week look like?
Yeah, mostly coaching. I coach one-on-one clients. I run small group programs in a membership. And I've been making a big pivot in my business in the past year. So a lot of my day-to-day has been rewriting web pages. I just spent 2 months creating a video sales letter, which sounds really long, but we were very painstaking about creating it and editing it, and then being critical about it, and getting it in front of some test audience, partly because I'm planning to do some paid traffic. And so I want to, sort of have my maximum opportunity with that. So I do some copy chiefing. That I take on copy chiefing clients. I love that work. It's just really, it's really fun work for me.
So copy chiefing is what, like a copy editing? Is that what, I think we have different terminology here. What's copy chiefing?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's not copy editing. It's really more looking with a copywriter, like a seasoned copywriter's critical eye.
Yeah.
So, like, what is the goal of this piece of copy? Looking a little bit at, what assets somebody was given sometimes to create the copy, and what the actual goal was. And to see, have you done that? Have you done it in a succinct way? Are there things that I read where I'm like, if I get a little confused, your reader is going to get confused. And, the thing I find most often is things are out of order. Like, people make arguments, but they don't read correctly structurally. And when I point it out, it's obvious to the writer, but you get so involved in your own piece, it's very, very hard to step away and get perspective. So it's it's kind of the fine tuning. And I'll find people will hire me when they've got like a big project on or a client that they really want to impress, or often if it's a long copy, because long copy is where you get the most lost, I think. And I'll just say one thing, because this would be a good tip for copywriters. When you're writing long copy, what tends to happen, because we go back, right? You write it, you let it sit, you go back, but what gets all the love is the top of the copy and not the bottom,
Yes.
because we always
Yeah.
start at the top and we get fatigued by the bottom. Like getting in at a later stage of your piece is really helpful. And the thing I think people forget too is to write to the offer, right? Because a lot of times you write the copy and then you get to the offer and you're out of gas. But if you've written the offer piece first, then you can write to the offer, and it kind of streamlines your whole process. So that's what a copy chief helps with. And maybe those are some tips for people writing their own copy.
Yeah, that
That's
is really
right.
useful.
Well, we've talked a little bit about proposals. We've talked a little bit about discovery calls. I would really love to ask you about how we can better qualify leads before the discovery call. Like I tend to send over a form or a questionnaire, which, whittles down people into those better fit clients. So I have an idea that they're possibly a good fit before the discovery call. But what are your ideas for that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love a form, or even a form on a website, if that's, where people are coming into you. And if you don't have a form or a questionnaire, or sometimes people won't be willing to fill those out, which is a good thing to know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the better clients will take the time,
Yeah. I agree.
right?
That's part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing is, if you don't have that, being willing to go back and forth in email a little bit and ask some questions, like ask some deep discovery questions, like what they've done before or why they're doing this project or what kind of outcomes they're hoping to achieve. And it gives you kind of a sense of, what they're looking for, but also, what they know and how they respond, which tells you whether they're going to be a good client or a fit for you. And again, it kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier about being bold and standing in your expertise and not feeling shy to ask those questions. Because honestly, it's a funny thing. It's like when you're new, you feel like the more questions you ask, the newer you look. And as you get more seasoned, you realize the more questions you ask, the more expert you look.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
true.
So, being a little bit bold and not afraid to ask the questions. Like think about what would you really want to know? What would help you decide if this client is a fit for you? And do it in a gracious way, of course, in a way that's about them, but be a little bit bolder in your pre-discovery process. And remembering that like the fit thing isn't totally up to them. I mean, it's
Yeah.
also up to you. Not everybody is a fit.
How do you manage the budget question? Like, do you say, what's your budget for this project? Or do you say, similar projects that I've worked on tend to come in at this cost? How do you approach that?
I love the similar line.
Yeah.
I have been known to say, I'm going to tell you what similar projects have come in on, and you can tell me if you're going to need some smelling salts.
That's a good way.
Because I kind of make a joke, like I want to couch it in like, this is high. Like I know this
Yeah.
is a lot of money,
Yeah.
and then they can talk me off of that, but I don't want them to think I'm sort of arrogant and like, trying to charge the most that I can. I've also will say to people, like we'll talk about your budget, and I want you to know I'm not asking you this so I can figure out like I can charge you the maximum amount of money. I want to know if we have a fit and what we can get done inside of what's realistic or reasonable for you right now.
That's a great way to put it too. I love that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, but because people are scared of asking for budgets. And
Yeah.
I also think I find particularly journalists, because they've come, particularly in the last few years, they've come from a position of scarcity where everything is, all the expenses, everything's being cut down and resources and budgets are being shrunk. They tend to come in with a smaller figure because they're scared of that question. Whereas people coming from the copywriting sort of version or from agency land where it's bigger budgets, it never scares them.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's just where you have to just like swallow hard and ask the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they say if you're not feeling a little bit sick when you do a number, you're not asking for enough or you're not doing it right.
Yeah. I think we have to also, I mean, you would have come across this, Amy, clients that really have no idea what something costs. They don't know what copywriting costs or what a project, is going to really cost them. So they're looking to you to set that benchmark a little bit or say, this is, a similar cost that I've charged
Yeah.
before.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that can be framed up inside of what actually you do inside of an engagement and a project, because they don't know and we can't expect them to. But, when you start telling them, like if you have a research component,
Yeah.
for example, to get voice of customer, whatever it is you're doing, and you tell them why you're doing that and, why it's important and how that differentiates them. And you can see the light bulb go off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That education.
Yeah. I think that can be a really important piece, especially when you're earlier on, and because you're likely working with clients who maybe are inexperienced and haven't worked with somebody before. But when you explain that and you explain the craft, and I think this is particularly prevalent with writing, because we're all, like, air quotes here, taught to write in school, right? Like everyone theoretically can write something, but you need to educate people sometimes about why this is, a craft and a discipline and how much education and time you've put into it. And then they're like, oh, okay. And people like that because, of course, they want to be working with somebody who's knowledgeable and expert. But
Yeah.
sometimes you have to, lead them along the path, if you will.
Show them. I think writing is one of those things. I think I sort of use the metaphor about cooking. Everyone can cook or everyone eats. And so they don't. But of course, the difference between an amazing meal and an average meal, there's a big difference. But writing, I like to think that when my clients see my final work, they go, oh, I see. But if you're doing that initial proposal, they haven't had that opportunity to see what you can deliver because they're just looking at, what they've had before. And if you're taking them up a level, it's interesting. Is there something you need to put into proposals? Do you find that there's a key thing to include that helps you get a yes from a client?
Yeah. Again, I think it's laying out what they want to achieve and how that's going to happen. So, acknowledging, and sometimes people are very specific, we need to get more clients, or we need to get more leads, or we need to generate this or that. And obviously we can't promise that. We know that. And to say that, I can't promise that, but like, here are the kinds of results I've gotten for people before, or here's how that works. And here's how we will, take you along the process. I think anything that reassures them without promising them. And I think that's reassuring too, because, if someone promises you the moon, you wonder a little bit, like,
Yeah.
hey, can they really,
Yeah.
And again, I think it's that thing where when you're more seasoned, you're much more likely to couch everything in terms of like, well, we don't know. And the 3 rules of marketing are test, test, and test. And we're going to have to find out, and all of these things. And people are like, okay, you know what you're talking about, rather than, if they get promised, something that seems
Too good to be true.
yeah, it seems pie in the sky, then it probably is. And so I think just making it really clear, and even in the proposal, you can talk about some of those things, some of the processes, and, and the research, and what's involved, and why you want to do it, and how willing you are to spend the time that it takes, to dig really deep to get them what they need to get. And I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
I think I need to redo all my proposals going forward. Just listening to you, Amy. I think they're a bit too light on, actually. But yeah, so it's good. It's
Depends on what you're
enlightening.
asking and who you're speaking to. Yeah.
This is true. We do like to ask all our guests about their tech tips. So is there any software or digital tools that you would be really lost without?
I really like, more than ever lately, like recording things and getting transcripts, being able to go over things. So that tool. And, I was thinking about this. The other thing that I really rely on heavily, because I have all the tools that we all have, the CRM and the the video accounts, mind mapping, or some kind of process tool where you can get things out of your head and into something.
Yeah.
I find mind mapping just works really, really well, especially, when you have this sense that everything's sort of floating out there and you want to corral it and bring it into, especially when you need to share that with somebody else, if you have an assistant or a team member, or someone else. I just find it's indispensable for me. It just feels like such a huge shortcut. I always feel like I'm cheating or getting away with something.
Yeah.
Do you use something specific to do mind mapping, like a tool?
I use something called, what is it called? Let me just tell you right here. I can't even, it's called Simple Mind Pro. That's what it's called.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
We'll
I've
pop that into the show notes.
never done that, but that is interesting. And sometimes at the beginning, particularly when you've got a big project and trying to sort of get some sort of structure to it, that's a great idea.
And actually, interesting, I'll just tie this back to one thing really quickly. I have shared those in proposals as well. Just as like a screenshot of what I'm going to do and all the different components. And there's something just about seeing it visually. First of all, there's a lot and people see how complex it is, but it also simplifies the complexity because it's
Yes.
usually branching and you can show sort of the order of things and why, which is really helpful too for someone to sort of visualize a project and particularly a timeline. And it's a great
Yeah.
teaching tool too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is really
Amazing. We'll
interesting.
definitely check that out. Amy, we could talk to you all day. This has
So
been
interesting.
fabulous. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us where listeners can find you and what kind of resources you offer.
Yeah. So at amyposner.com, and I have the Breakthrough Beat, which you mentioned early on. And that's really like, I consider that sort of my best stuff and certainly my best free stuff. I really endeavor to make that something that's useful and valuable, like actionable, use it right now.
Yeah.
And I have a course called Breakthrough Freelancer, which teaches all the business skills that we've been talking about. And I just added a new component to it, a live component where people can actually ask me questions and come to a monthly meeting, because I find that's often the killer in a course is like you get into it and you're so excited and then you like get dead ended, like, oh, but how do I, X or Y?
Yeah.
So I've just improved that. So that's a great way. I mean, I run small group coaching and masterminds, and anyone that gets my newsletter finds out about those, but those tend to be expensive and, a little smaller and more exclusive. So this other is sort of my mastermind in a box, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe
Amazing.
it's about that long lead that somebody might, ease into this as they
Yeah.
get more and more confidence and build up some basic skills and,
Yeah.
long lead.
Yeah, and I'm restarting a membership in 2025 as well. Those
Oh.
have been very successful for ways for people to, get questions answered and get content and that sort of thing. So yeah, all of those ways. Thank you for asking.
Amazing.
That's
We'll pop all that in the
fantastic.
show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, Amy. So interesting.
Yeah.
And we didn't say
Amazing.
joining us from the West Coast of the US. So time difference. And it's so lovely to see you on the Zoom and in face to face, even if we're not in the same room.
Yeah.
So don't forget, if you like the show, don't forget to leave us a rating or review. And we'll be back again next week.
We will. See you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors, Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software that helps freelancers run their business with confidence.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you can check your welcome emails for an exclusive discount code on the annual subscription rate. You can also find it in the private Facebook Gold group, or just contact us at hello@rachelslist.com.au.